Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, Parallel Deku. Back with another fanfiction. This is the movie of What If Deku Met Senpai Nejire? Now before starting, please give this video a like. And subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Keima. Izuku shouted as he pulled his head out of the engine. He looked around and glanced at his mother, who was sitting comfortably in their old work truck. Somehow, she managed to make the whole truck look a whole lot bigger than it actually was, but then again she wasn't like him or Pa in that regard. Start her up? Inko nodded and started up the truck. The clutch bucked slightly, but he could fix that in a moment, and then the engine purred to life. The old work truck was held together largely by elbow grease, prayer, and what his mother liked to call Izuku ingenuity, which he reckoned was a thing given how he was accepted into UH despite being quirkless. Though most people never believed him when he told them that. His mother hopped out of the truck with the engine still running and rushed over to give him a hug, her arms not quite able to wrap around him. "I knew you'd be able to fix her, Izuku." She beamed up at him and patted him on the zizi with a slight wink. "All those Legos we got you have finally started to pay off. Your father wanted to take a look at it, but you know how useless he is with machines." "Hey now Ma, that's not right. Pa's plenty good at wrecking machines." Izuku gave a light laugh and looked around the spacious garage that had once functioned as his workshop, spotting several unfinished projects designed around making his Ma's life a bit easier around the ranch. Sure, Pa could do most of the work, but there was still a lot for her to do, and while she was strong for a woman her size, she was still a woman of her size. "Oh, I'm well aware of your father's penchant for destruction, but you know him, he's a gentle soul. It's why he insists on taking care of the cattle himself." Inko gave a short sigh and shook her head, her long green ponytail swishing like a stubborn horse's tail. She clapped the truck with a smile and gestured towards the trailer filled to the brim with produce. "Now I can make it to market day while the gettin's good. Might even make a donation to UA so they give my baby boy some of that preferential treatment." Inko gave him a sly wink that made her look like the troublesome mischief maker of her youth. From the photos that Izuku had seen, his mother had been a delinquent. Mitsuki, whose house he was staying at in Tokyo for school, had confirmed that on multiple occasions with photos, a promo video, and even a gangster tattoo on her back. Whether or not his mother may or may not have a tattoo was a mystery that Izuku was quite content to take to his grave. "You know Ma," he let her name drawl off of his lips for a moment as he tried to think of the right words to say. "If it's too much for you and Pa, I can drop out and help out around the farm." "Hell no." His mother's rebuttal was swift, sharp, and final. "You are far too smart to be wasting it on farm equipment. Izu, that funny little rat from you said so himself, so if me and your father have to work a little harder, so be it." "But Ma, what? You got someone bullying you down there. You're at a hero school, who the hell would bully you there? Just sick Mitsuki's boy on them. Katsuki's like an over-caffeinated yappy dog that will actually tear AF ankle off if you're not careful." Inko let out a sigh and looked towards the spot where a tree once stood. Said tree had been an old cherry blossom that had meant something to someone at some point and went up in cinders when Katsuki got just a bit on the ornery side of things. It wasn't intentional, the boy just had some anger issues, and the fact that Izuku was just a year older than him seemed to piss Katsuki off. But they were technically friends because while Katsuki wanted to be a hero, Izuku just wanted to make things to help people. Well, that and swing a big butt hammer at villains, but he technically wasn't allowed to do that. No, most of my classmates are real nice Ma. I get along with most of them, and this year my Jima-sensei is giving me the keys to the workshop." "Good." Inko spun and wagged her finger at him. "Now, no more talk about you coming home to work on this farm. Help me load up, and I'll give you a ride to the village." Yes, Ma. Despite being among the smallest of the critters on the farm, there was little to no doubt that his Ma was the one in charge. Only the goats argued with her. "That's right. Now, provided nothing else breaks down, me and your father included, the next time you're here you best bring along a girlfriend." Inko opened, slammed, and shut multiple items as she spoke, but the words carried with them a clear ultimatum that he was to have a girlfriend the next time he came home or there would be nothing on this green earth that would stop his mother's disappointed scowl. She might even beat him with a sandal. What? A girlfriend? But it's not that simple, ma. Most of them are city folk and besides, there was already a certain girl he had his eye on. An amazing, kind, cheerful woman that he had only seen glimpses of from time to time. There was the sports festival where she flew through the air like a fairy, the beauty pageant where she dazzled them all with her stellar moves, and a few glimpses in the lunchroom when she got excited and flew off. You have the biggest heart there, Izuku. His mother scoffed and looked him in the eye. She placed a hand up onto his knee and patted softly right above his heart. Likely literally. You are sweet, handsome, and what's her name? Izuku asked, looking down at his much smaller mother. He didn't realize he had been smiling just then. What? His mother tapped her foot on the ground between each word. Lucky, his mother's favorite horse, neighed in agreement. Don't you play coy with me, Izuku Midoriya? She spoke his name like each syllable was its own word and looked at him with a wry grin on her face. You were thinking about her right then, weren't you? Yeah? Then tell me her name. Izuku stared at the trailer hitch as he fastened it into place. His own belongings had already been placed into the back of his mother's truck. There was a lot less there than when his mother first drove him all the way to Tokyo. He shrugged. Well, if he couldn't tell his own mother who he had a crush on, he might never get around to telling anyone. Nejire Hado. That's a lovely name. Inko smiled and hopped into the truck. Now go tell your father goodbye. XXXX. In Mei's opinion, orientation was boring. And worse. Classes were boring. She had to sit through terrible things like English and history and art and math, and so many other classes until she got to the fun part of the day. How on earth were her teachers expecting her to sit through several boring hours first thing in the morning when there were babies to be made? There was no way she'd be able to stay awake through all that, especially not with the promise of being able to make some really high-quality babies. She'd been stocking up on ideas too. There was a physical need in her body that was manifesting itself as an itch in the back of her head that was telling her that she absolutely had to make something as soon as possible. Or, it could just be that she hadn't taken a shower in a while and the filth was getting to her. Either way, that certainly explained why her classmates were avoiding her. But that didn't matter. What mattered was what they thought of her babies. But to do that she needed to survive until the afternoon where her sensei, what was his name again, would take them to the workshop. What happens if she didn't get to make something? That was how this was going to go, wasn't it? Her sensei was just going to show them the workshop and go over rules and other junk that the rest of her class needed to hear, but she didn't. She knew all the stuff in there. Probably. And if she didn't, she'd read the manual, and if it didn't have a manual, then she'd make a manual for it. Sure, her manuals were simple, but that was fine. For the most part, the simpler the instructions, the better they were. For example, her older brother often told her not to burn the house down whenever she was left alone. And that was easy to do. Mei drummed her fingers along her desk, eyes locked firmly onto the clock as she watched it click slowly, ever so slowly, towards the final stretch of classes for the day. Design. All rolled into one 3-hour stretch of time that she was just waiting to dive into. There was a good chance she'd even be able to convince whatever Hisnamai sensei that he should totally keep the workshop open and let her stay late and make her first baby. She was so creatively constipated that her first real support item was probably going to be the best thing ever. Maybe she'd be able to live in there. All right, class. Whatever Hisnamai sensei tapped on the podium with a large metallic claw and then scratched his own chin. Was it normal for their sensei to be shirtless? Since today is the first day of class, we'll be going over the basic functions of the workshop, and more importantly, safety protocols. Boring. Sensei. Mei stood in her seat and held her hand up. Will we be able to make something today? Whatever Hisnamai sensei glared at her for a moment before he nodded. The workshop will be open after class if you manage to pass the safety test. Mei was at the front of the line as she followed their sensei to the workshop. Well, one of the workshops at UA. There were a few depending on the needs. There was the general mechanic workshop for boring mundane stuff, the large robot workshop that was for 3rd years and up. Then, there was her ultimate goal, the gear workshop where students and teachers alike created support items for heroes at the request of students and teachers alike. And from there, she'd be able to get her foot in the door as up-and-coming heroes would use her gear. And then marketing would see her and she'd be able to sell her babies to them and get lots of money to make more babies so she could get even more money for even more babies. And then she'd retire, build a giant robot, run out of cash, and then start making babies again from ground zero. Repeat until dead. Her brother was both impressed and concerned by her life plan. Her former teachers were mostly just concerned. She had to remove the part about going to the moon and creating robots that could mine asteroids in a timely manner. But those were still a part of her plan. Mei could barely contain her excitement as they entered the workshop. It took all of her willpower not to dive into the component cabinets, grab the welder and the plasma cutters, and start working on some babies. Alright, welcome to the creation station. Whatever Hisnamai-sensei began a long spiel about how they were going to be using this area for projects and other such things, but Mei was too busy focusing on all the different tools she was going to be able to use in the near future. They had a fabricator here. And before I forget, whatever Hisnamai-sensei clapped his metal hands and opened a back door. Izuku, come on out, you need to introduce yourself. A large green-haired man stepped out from the back room. He dwarfed her by a lot, and just one of his large muscular arms probably weighed as much as she did. A farmer's tan could be seen on his arms despite the fact that he had on a tank top that left his broad and mountainous shoulders exposed. With a casual motion, he pulled off the large gloves on his hands and placed them on a table. Then his smile lit up the world. Pleasure to meet y'all. I'm Izuku Midoriya. I help my Jima-sensei in the workshop. I hope we can all get along. She knew that Izuku was talking to everyone. But it really felt like he was talking just to her. After a moment's consideration, her ovaries decided to explode, taking her plans for the future along for the ride. Mei stared at the bed that dominated her apartment in Tokyo. With a light tap of her foot, her apartment door shut tight behind her. The sound of her auto door locking baby activating behind her did put a light smile on her face. She took 2 steps forward and allowed her book bag to slide from her shoulder as she slowly undid what remained of her school uniform. It was only her first day of class at UA, and already she was more tired, physically and mentally, especially mentally, than she had ever been. Normally she felt like she could keep going forever and ever when it came to making babies and just in general. But today, she had met him. Izuku Midoriya, a 7-foot-tall second year that looked like one of his well-muscled arms could weigh as much as she did. He was also great with machines, like really great with machines. Some of the babies he was making had inspired her to make new and exciting babies that made her previous ideas look like a modern hour. He was also nice. So nice that it actually mattered. Mei stared at her bed for a moment and heavily debated the idea of actually going to bed early for the first time in her life. With a grunt, she slammed her face down onto the mattress and embraced the feeling of her still moderately clean sheets. She could almost still smell the industrial levels of detergent that had turned the once blue sheets into a murky gray. With her free hand, she stretched back and plopped off her boots with as little effort as possible, which ended up being more taxing anyway. In theory, today had gone great. At least, once she had gotten through classes and had been allowed into the workshop. What Hisnamai-sensei was very instructive, and Izuku even more so. Not to mention there were so many wonderful babies she could make at UEA. There was just one, small, itsy-bitsy, tiny, problem. That just so happened to be the size of a barn. And that problem's name. Izuku Midoriya. Specifically, his everything. He was. Mei let out and kicked her legs as she buried her face deeper into the blankets. He was so distracting. It was so strong to focus on anything that wasn't him and his DM smile. Not only that, but there was something about the way that he said her name that made her stop functioning. Legs, arms, mouth, everything just turned to goo. Her cheeks felt warm and her heart beat fast, all the while she couldn't stop looking at him. Just thinking about him now was making her cysti vibrate. No, wait, that was just her phone. With far more effort than was necessary, Mei flopped onto her back and watched as her phone slid free from its pocket and nestled into her neck like an overly affectionate rat. After letting it ring once more, she picked it up. Mei Hatsume, future leader of support item technology speaking. Mayday. Her brother's usual bombastic voice did not lose any of its oomph over the phone. Greetings from Kyoto. Everything's fine over here, the workshop is still going great. But how are things over at the Big UA? It was your first day of class, right? How were the teachers? Did you make any new friends? Made it. You there? Did you forget to eat today? I ate, though she was hungry again. Sorry Otto, I'm just out of it. What? Was class that rough? Otto asked, the sound of someone grinding something followed by a door shutting behind him carried over onto the phone. Not really, everything was pretty boring. Mei stared up at her ceiling for a few moments. She should make a baby that would start her ceiling fan for the summer. Or, she should make a baby that was her ceiling fan. Or she should focus on making more useful babies for heroes. So many choices. Then what was wrong? Did you get in a fight with your classmates? Again. That was once. In 4th grade. Someone had destroyed her popsicle catapult. No. Then what? Purity. No, that was last week. Alright, your older brother is gonna need some more info. Mei let out a sigh. Well, classes were boring. Like always. I didn't really pay attention because I was so excited for getting my first look at the UA workshop. And then, she paused and bit her lip. Did you get detention for not paying attention? No, she let out an exaggerated noise as her stomach made a loud, unhappy noise. I went there with my class and it was great, but I kept getting distracted by Izuku. Who's Izuku? My senpai, he's like a helper at the workshop and I think he's kind of in charge of the place when sensei isn't there. He has a key. And how was he distracting you? He wasn't flirting with you, was he? Flirting? I don't think so. Basically, it's strong to focus on anything besides him. Her brother paused. In what way? She shrugged. I don't know. It's just that whenever he's around I want to look at him, and my face feels warm, and my heart feels all funny and my tongue doesn't work and I like to look at him. Wait, she said that twice. I see. There was a pause. Mei, her brother asked in a stern voice. She asked, still thinking about what was the proper shade of green to describe Izuku. Just regular green would pretty much cover it, but that was lazy. Maybe a jade green. No, that wasn't quite right. Verdant green. She knew. With the two primary colors being forest green and jade green. I think you might have a crush on Izuku. Oh. She blinked. She knew what a crush was. She had heard some of the girls in her old classes talking about it from time to time, and she even had been told that someone had a crush on her at one point. A crush was when someone had romantic feelings for someone else. The boy had a crush on her because she had big bub. And she had a crush on Izuku because he was a giant arms, a hand that could pick her up and throw her over his shoulder like she was a sack of potatoes, a smile that made her heart make weird noises and a cute accent that just drew her in. Not to mention the fact that if she was aware of him, she was hyper-aware of him. Okay, she replied slowly. What do I do with it? No idea. I never even asked any of my crushes out. Her brother gave a great big sigh. Well, you're a smart cookie, Mei. I'm sure you'll figure something out. And if this Izuku guy ends up breaking your heart, call me up and we can make a knee-breaking robot. Hey. Mei stared up at the ceiling as the call with her brother came to a close. So, if she had a crush on Izuku, then the only thing she had to do was tell him about it. That sounded easy. XXXX one time, when she was a small grease-covered child that many people labeled as a grease monkey, Mei had encountered a appealing rust-covered machine. She wanted to take it apart, take it home, and try to make something out of it. But the nut on it was so rusted on that it had practically become one with the machine itself. In order to remove that nut, Mei not only needed Otto's help, but several dozen chemicals, a buzz saw, a power wrench, and a metric F ton of elbow grease. Point being, removing that nut with nothing but her left butt cheek would have been easier than admitting her abrupt feelings towards Izuku. So far, all she had managed to do was make a vaguely squeaky noise in his general area. Well, if she couldn't confess for whatever the hell reason was actually stopping her from being able to do just that, then she needed to just focus on her work. That was it. She would focus on her work and Izuku would focus on his work. And they would both focus. It didn't matter if there were a dozen other people sharing this same space with them, but it was all good. Even if she was mildly panicking right now just by being in the same room as him. Not to mention what the hell was up with her response when he greeted her. He said hello. She said "Pwapufdu," which was just a gargled mess of ideas and concepts that she attempted to say all at once. Izuku just gave a light laugh and apologized for surprising her. Focus. She needed to focus. What was the first thing she was going to be building? Hoverboots. Grappling hook. Battering ram. Net gun. A robot that could confess to Izuku for her. She slapped her cheeks and shook her head. The first one. She ambled over to a design station, which was a large tablet that was filled to the brim with programs to help her design her future projects. It had everything from a blueprint design to inventory and even a special order program that could get materials the workshop didn't have on hand. So much nicer than using her brother's phone to order stuff and designing with a notepad. It took her roughly 2 seconds to figure out how exactly the tablet functioned and another 3 to find the stylus in the drawer. Hover boots were a simple idea. First step would be determining how much weight she would actually need to move with them. If she used herself as the basis, then it wouldn't be too large. As she worked on her project, she once again became hyper-aware of Izuku's presence in the room, in part because he was standing right behind her. She glanced back and caught a glimpse of his curious smile and could hear the gears in her mind grind to a screeching halt. "Hi there, Mei." He said her name in that slightly off way than everyone else that just made her want to wiggle. He looked at her tablet and smiled. "Whoa, you got the design process down. When did you start that project?" But she could hear the static of her brain trying to figure out what to say. "Oh, sorry, I guess I must be scaring you talking to you out of the blue like this." Izuku scratched the back of his head and looked to the side. "Sorry, I'll leave you to it. I started today." Her mouth said so fast that it just came out as today. "What?" Izuku looked at her in surprise and took a step towards her and the tablet. "You did all this since this morning?" "Ah, no," she admitted and watched Izuku's shoulders slump in relief. "Since I walked in the door." "Well, I'll be a monkey's uncle. That's some talent you got there, Mei." He stood even closer to her and looked at the tablet more closely. "You mind showing me what you got? I've been looking for a pair of boots for my own project, and yours are looking prettier than a speckled pup under a wagon with his tongue hanging out." "What? And why did she want him to say that about her?" "Sure." She beamed up at him and started to go through the tabs she had built up over the tablet. "This is the first iteration I've been toying with. It's first iteration. How many have you made in?" He looked at the clock. 2 hours? 4.5. Izuku let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be. Mei, I have a feeling we're nothing but horses. Of the same color when it comes to support gear." When it came to tech, she could talk to Izuku. And they could talk a lot. It only made her crush that much worse though. Izuku knew that city folk were different the first time he had stepped into the big city. They were small like his ma, but without a bite that was as bad if not worse than her bark. Sure, there were more villains in the cities, but there were also simply more heroes. And the heroes were everywhere: billboards, teen beat shows, bus stations, fast food places. A fond memory of Izuku Ballin, his eyes out to get a happy meal that had an all-might toy in it when he came to visit his grandparents, put a smile on his face as he continued to tinker on some request for the third years. Pretty soon, the first years would be making their request too, then they'd be real busy. Or maybe not. They did have a genius like Mei around. As much as Izuku knew that city folk were a world apart from him, he was pretty sure that city girls his age were even more so. He could barely understand what they were saying. Hell, for all he knew, they were speaking in giggles and letters. One such example was Nejire Hado. He had heard her talk and not heard a DMN word she said at least twice. Didn't stop her from being prettier than she had any right to be, and she had a lot of rights to be that pretty. Then there was Mei Hatsume. Mei was squirrelier than 3 tanuki in a barrel fighting over the last curd of cheese. She was excitable, energetic, more than a bit skittish, and just a plumb technical genius when it came to making gadgets. Sure, she talked fast, but it was in ways that Izuku could understand, even if he did think it was a bit strange to call her gadgets and gizmos babies, but he couldn't fault her for that. "Senpai." Mei came bouncing into the workshop with clear disregard for the no-running rule. Then again, he wasn't entirely certain that she was running. Mei just had the natural speed and reflexes of a squirrel next to a cola plant, so normal human laws, be they actual physics or not, just simply didn't apply. He had witnessed her catch a rogue chunk of metal that had once been a nut and bolt, that had been launched with enough force to break a window, and then drop it to the ground like it was nothing. "Settle down, Mei." He smiled and watched her jitter for a moment as she waved around a stack of papers in both hands. Her CT stopped bouncing half a second after she did, which was just not something he should be focusing on. Mei was his Kouhai, they talked shop, and that was the end-all and be-all of their relationship. It just wasn't proper for him to be staring at her like that. They came. Mei flashed the stack of papers at him. "The first requests are here. I can't wait to get started on some of these. Ooh, I think I can see one that I can convert one of my babies into. It might take a bit of work, but it should work." Mei turned towards the corner of the workshop that she had taken over. Several of her babies sat there just waiting for someone to adopt them. "Can I get started now? Where's Power Loader Sensei?" Izuku placed a hand on Mei's shoulder and watched as she went incredibly still. He wasn't sure if she had something about being touched or not, but she had no concern for anyone else's personal space, so he reckoned it was fair. Besides, it was a pretty good off-SW for her. He normally likes to divvy those out to who could do them justice. He paused for a moment. "Not that you can't do them justice all on your own, Mei. Come to think of it, most of his senpai were gone, and there had been a gap of second years when he was a first year." Mei held the stack tight and beamed up at him. "He's the one that gave these to me." "Really?" "Yeah." Mei bounced again. He said he had something special for you. And you ran off before he could tell you what?" She nodded fast enough to knock her goggles down onto her face. "Yep. Sorry, senpai." "Don't worry about that, Mei. I'm sure Sensei will mosey on over here at his own pace. You know what you're going to be working on." "All of them?" "Of course ya are." He gave a slight chuckle and patted Mei on her shoulder again. "Just holler if you need anything." Mei nodded and ran off with a mad glee that would make a billy goat blush. She really had one hell of a smile when she was in her element. The door to the workshop opened again and Izuku caught Power Loader Sensei waddling in with a large black tub gripped in his metal-capped hands. Much like Izuku himself, Power Loader was something of a country boy that had grown up in the dirt, mud, and grease before coming to the city. The biggest difference was the breed of country boy. Izuku was a farmer, and Power Loader. Power Loader was what civilized folks might call a redneck, the kind of kid that grew up in a small town where the only fun thing to do was work on cars and cause mischief. And Power Loader Sensei was apt in both those fields. "Izuku." Sensei placed the container on the table and pushed them away. "Materials for your next project?" Izuku raised an eyebrow and looked at the container for a few tender moments, half expecting it to start moving about and lunging at him. Normally, materials were gotten after the request, not as part of the request. And most of the time they didn't come in a large plastic container. "And what am I going to be making?" Izuku opened up the container and found that it was filled with countless Ziploc bags all neatly stacked and organized. Curiosity bit him in the arse when he pulled one bag up and found that it was filled with dozens of off-colored chips that were curved like a crescent moon. "Toenails. It's a bit of an ask, but consider this a test of your skill." Sensei gave a dry laugh and handed Izuku the request form. "Mirio Togata has requested a visor that will phase with his costume. I included the formula that was used to make his costume, but you'll have to make do with using some rather unorthodox materials. So, let me get this straight." Izuku looked at the container and saw blonde strands of hair, a powder that was likely skin cells, as well as several things no one in the world would dare call appetizing. "You want me to make something he can see through that won't fall off his face? If you can make it durable, that'd be great too. Why's this sound like you're just loading me with work you don't want to do?" "Because that's exactly what it is." Sensei gave a toothy grin and kicked both feet up onto the desk before he flashed a second request towards Izuku. "But I'll sweeten the deal for you and give this one to you." It took him less than a second to read the name and swipe the paper from Sensei. "A request from Nejire. You're a sly man for making me work for this, Sensei, but you got yourself a deal." What's a Nejire? Mei bounced up next to them. Izuku gave a slight jump at her sudden appearance, but Sensei had it much worse, falling out of his chair with a metallic clank that sounded several kinds of painful. Oh, of course you wouldn't know Mei. Izuku gave a great big smile and nearly sighed when he thought about it. She's a third year now and one of the best students here, and she's something else. Come to think of it, you'd probably get along great with her. With how many questions Nejire seemed to ask and how happy Mei was to talk about her or her babies, the two would get along like two peas in a pod. Is she a friend of yours, senpai? Well, no, she's just. She's the girl Izuku has a crush on. Sensei pulled himself up off the ground and scratched the back of his head. Biggest mistake of his life was telling me about it, and now I get to abuse that knowledge so I don't have to make a mask out of boogers. Yeah, Izuku turned his attention to the box of stuff again. I can't even melt any of this down to make a plastic or a glass. What in the hell am I supposed to do? Beats me, Sensei shrugged and pointed towards Mei. See if she'll help you. So, Senpai has a crush? Mei muttered. Yeah, but can you keep that between us, Mei? I'd rather not have the whole school know. XXXX. Mei stared at her laptop with a perplexed look on her face. She had a crush on Izuku. And Izuku had a crush on Nejire. So, what did that mean? And why did she feel ever so slightly annoyed? Was it because Izuku liked some girl that wasn't her? That was probably it. She had been following the internet's advice ever since she tried and failed to tell Izuku how she felt. Some tips were really basic, like bathing regularly, while others were impossible, like putting on makeup. Apparently eye contact was huge. Well, if Izuku liked Nejire, then that meant she just needed him to like her more. It was like a competition. And to do that she needed to get information. To the internet. She quickly typed in Nejire Hado's name and found her Twitter as well as several videos of her. One was for last year's sports festival. And another was for a beauty pageant. There were a few images of her scattered around. Apparently she had done a photo shoot with some other pro hero and, she could see why Izuku would be attracted to that. Mei ran her hand through her clumpy pink hair and sighed. She probably couldn't pull off something like that even if she tried. Besides, that stuff wasn't who she was. She'd just have to win Izuku over in ways that Nejire couldn't. Like with her babies. Hey Nejire. Nejire spun, a tiny bottle of milk pressed to her lips to help her recharge from hero training, and to replenish her skin after having taken a shower to get rid of all that sweat. It was a good thing she could dry her hair by sending her quirk through it. Her wave motion even styled it. She came a long way from hating her quirk because it made her sleepy when she was little. Yu stuck her entire body into the locker room. Her hair was a bright neon pink this month that made her look like she had fallen out of some CC cyberpunk anime. And Nejire looked like that too. Blue and pink were so good together. Maybe that was why she liked purple. With one last gulp, Nejire let out the traditional sigh that came with drinking milk. Milk after a bath wasn't the most uncommon thing in Japan, but a lot of people didn't like the taste of milk. At first Nejire did too, but she kept at it for one very stupid reason. An upperclassman that had huge boobies told her that she got them because she drank milk after every bath. And so Nejire started to do the same. She honestly had no idea if it worked or not, but Yu hated drinking milk and she was, seriously, I get it you're busty, now stop comparing our tips and get dressed. Yu blushed and crossed her arms with a huff. Seriously, despite how cute you are it's like you have a melons for a brain. Well, that's not true at all. I got lots of stuff in my brain. Like, how to beat Mirio in the sports festival, or how to get Tamaki to stop being a chicken and ask that one girl out, or how I can get Ryukyu to dress cuter. Clothes Nejire. Yu gave that sigh that normally meant she needed to hurry. But, I like running around naked. Nejire stuck her tongue out and dove back into her locker. Her hero suit was already tucked away into her briefcase and she was all set for spending a weekend at Ryukyu's agency again. Anyways, what's up? You're normally busy with the student council this PRD, right? Yeah, kind of, but that guy from the support department wants to talk to you. Nejire pulled her head through her undershirt and stared at Yu for a second. She did put in that request for a support item recently, but there was no way that they were done already, right? Also she said guy. Which one? Not that she knew many of the people in the support department, let alone the guys, but she was loosely aware of a few. The one that has a crush on you? Nejire stopped buttoning her skirt for a moment and gave you the best stink eye she could manage. Did she have any idea how little that narrowed it down? Is it the tall one with green hair and has unironically said, y'all at least once a day? Yeah, his name's Izuku. Apparently he's done with your support item and wants you to test it out and see if there's any additional modifications you want? Yu scratched the back of her head and sighed. I honestly don't know why everyone treats me as the go-get Nejire girl. Because you love me. Nejire gave Yu the biggest open-mouth smile that she could muster. And you've been my BFF forever. Don't remind me, Yu groaned. Anyways, I guess head to the workshop after class or something? Nejire nodded. You wanna come with? Nah, I have student council stuff to deal with, and then I have to head home early to take care of my brother. Yu let out a sigh and shook her head. Besides, no offense but watching you test stuff is kind of boring. What? But you used to love watching me train. Not really, I was just bad at standing up for myself and couldn't say no. Yu waved her off and headed towards the door. Oh, and I guess I should thank you for helping me grow a spine. Nejire pouted as she watched her friend vanish behind the door. And then frowned when she realized how tight her BR was. Either it shrunk in the wash, or the milk was paying off. Still, bras were expensive. Wait, could she order a BR from the support course? Wait, then she'd only be allowed to use it in her hero costume. She bet the support department could make great bras, even if she preferred to free melons. XXXX now that she thought about it, she had never even talked to Izuku, let alone actually seen him. Sure, most of that was because she always ate her lunch on the roof with Yu and she struggled strong to come up with any support items that wouldn't just be wasting people's time. So, all she knew about Izuku was that he was a second year, he had green hair, he had a crush on her, and apparently he was from the boonies. Come to think of it, Nejire paused in front of the workshop and tapped on her chin. How come she'd never been in here before? Ever since she had seen her neighbor wearing a grease-stained tank top while working on her car in the summer heat, she had a mild to severe thing for grease monkeys. Oh right, BGMI existed. It wasn't that Nejire hated BGMI. It was just, the two-time winner of the Miss Con contest had a habit of rubbing Nejire the wrong way. Which was really strong because Nejire actually liked to be rubbed. She still wasn't exactly sure which version she liked more, a grease monkey girl or a grease monkey boy. Both had their merits. On the one hand, the girl would likely be a tomboy and have short messy hair and exposed upper arms, and if she had big boobies that'd be a bonus too. But if it was a guy, then it would just be great. Especially if they were buff. With a hum, Nejire opened up the door to the workshop and was greeted by a beehive of busybodies buzzing around a bunch of workstations as they made a bunch of gizmos and doodads. But despite the business, she found herself drawn towards the back corner where she saw a grease-covered angel with pink hair. It wasn't the first time that Nejire had been attracted to a girl, and it wouldn't be the last, but something about this girl, probably the fact that she had thick pink hair that just looked like someone had stuck a bunch of bubble gum on her head and called it good, or the fact that the tank top she was wearing was tight across her CGST. Who was bigger? Did she drink milk? What was her name? What was with those goggles? Could she try them on? Her eyes were pretty. Were those because of her quirk? What was she making? It looked like a boot. Why was she making a boot? Where was the other one? Where'd she get so dirty? Did she want to take a bath? Ah, Nejire, the slightly raspy voice of one of the shirtless teachers. She never talked to him, so she never learned his name. Besides, he was the support teacher, waved her over from behind a large desk that had a solid stone countertop that looked far more damaged than anything else at you. You're just on time. I am. She asked, looking around the busy support room again. She didn't see anyone that looked like they would say y'all to her or with green hair. Was there some appointment or something? Just a phrase. The metal-clad sensei leaned forward and pointed a metal claw towards a back room. Izuku's in there, and make sure you don't let that stench out. Close the door behind ya. Ah, got it, thank you Metal Hand Sensei. It's power loader. Sorry. The moment Nejire entered the room, she was hit by a pungent sour smell that was blended with the strong burning scent of bleach. Did she need a mask or something? Was this why she never met Izuku? Did he just smell like this all the time? She plugged her nose and looked around the room. More advanced-looking tools lined the walls, and there was even a large stand that had what looked like a half-built All Might-sized robot or armor. Scattered on a clean-looking metallic table was a bunch of bags and trays with several little dishes with stuff in them that were soaked in some stuff that looked like water, but probably wasn't water. All of that was fine and all, but all of her attention was drawn in towards the black hole in the room. Why the hell did no one tell her that there was a sweaty, grease-covered, green-haired version of All Might that was younger than her? That was hitting so many boxes she was going to need to have to come up with a whole DMN test just to cover everything. Like, he was tall, really, really tall. Why? Why was he so tall? Was that his quirk? It didn't have to be because of random mutation quirks. It wasn't uncommon for someone to just randomly be tall, but still, this guy's arms looked bigger than her entire body. She knew the saying anything more than a handful was a waste, but if that was the case she'd need head-sized bub to even come close to wasting melons around this guy. Seriously, this guy had a crush on her. What the hell? Why did no one mention that he was so tall and hunky and beefy? Her voice was off due to her pinched nose. You wanted to see me? Izuku jumped. His attention had been on some kind of a project or something, and she had disrupted that. A mask and goggles obscured much of his face, but still she could see the shock and panic in his. It was almost as bad as Tamaki when anything with a pulse talked to him. Nejire. He looked towards the clock. On time. Sorry, I was busy and got lost in my quirk and we should get out of here. I'm sure it stinks. She barely understood what was happening before she was escorted out of the room and back into the busy beehive of busybodies. Why'd it stink in there? What were you making? What was with all of those little dishes? Were you making drags? Izuku pulled off his goggles and mask. Okay, she needed to stab the person who told her that Izuku had a crush on her but failed to mention the fact that he was tall, buff, had a great smile and just looked like a great guy. And her size queen senses were tingling, even if it was just proportional. Izuku scratched the back of his head. His cheeks were growing redder by the moment. Well, you're friends with that Mirio guy, right? Nejire nodded. I'm busy trying to figure out how to turn toenails, boogers, and hair into a glass or something else see-through. Izuku blinked and let his arm drop. It's as gross as it sounds. Sorry you had to smell that. I wanted to wait for you out here. Oh, don't worry, it was kind of neat. Besides, I can smell fine now. She took in a deep breath of the smell of the workshop and regretted it slightly as she still smelt a bit of those chemicals. But what did you want to see more for? To ask her out? She'd say yes. Oh right. Izuku clapped his hands and gave her a great big smile that reminded her of a 5-year-old being told to cheese for a camera. The fact that a 7-foot-tall man was doing it was just adorable. Hey, Mei, can you bring me Nejire's bracers? The pink-haired grease angel asked from across the shop. Oh, her, right? In the blink of an eye, the pink-haired girl appeared in front of them holding a set of seafoam green bracers. Oh, Nejire floated a bit and looked at them. Those are super pretty. Are they really going to help me direct my waves? Should, Izuku admitted and grabbed one of the pair. At least after some fine-tuning, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. If you're free we can start testing right away. That sounds fun. I think Gym Epsilon is open right now. Great. Izuku laughed. Let's head on over there. Mei, did you want to come? Mei looked towards Izuku and then back towards her own project before looking back towards Izuku before she nodded. She was going to have both a big giant teddy bear Kouhai and a slightly grumpy curvy as heck Kouhai watch her shoot lasers out of her hands. This was going to be a great day. There was something brewing between Nejire and Mei, and Izuku found himself more lost than a hog in a bathtub in what to do about it. Sure, they were being civil, but when there was water about, even a rabbit would get along with a fox. Izuku scratched the back of his head as he looked at Mei, who was switching between gathering data and glaring at Nejire. Nejire at least didn't seem bothered by none of it. Or she was, and that was why she was smiling so much at Mei. But then again, Nejire was currently flying around like a hummingbird that just drank sugar water, and Izuku ain't never seen a bird that didn't look like it was smiling. Well, save for a cockatoo that had its wings clipped. He imagined that flying was a surefire way to put a smile on someone's face. Or maybe, just maybe, that was the natural effect Nejire had on people. Especially herself. No. Nejire flew past him for the umpteenth time, complete with her own sound effects that were as adorable as they were childish. Many kids often gave their quirks sound effects to help them control them, and it was effective enough that even pros did it, though it was often calling out their super moves. Izuku watched as Nejire came within inches of the ground before she shot up into the air, her body bending like grain in the wind, and her long blue hair forming a wave behind her. She reached her apex, the skirt of her uniform floating up to reveal the tight black shorts she had on. Then she spread her arms and legs like she had exploded like a summer firework and let out a cheer that echoed throughout the entire gym. "Flying is so much easier. Glad everything's workin'," he called, barely able to contain his grin. He had put in a lot of work into those devices, a set of 4 that helped to channel Nejire's wave energy through to her hands. It increased not only her output, but her accuracy and speed as well. Nejire dove in the air, her giggles and joy echoing through the entire gymnasium, and Izuku himself felt like he was on cloud 9 with how much Nejire was enjoying his support item. Or he would have been, had it not been for the dark cloud looming over Mei. Mei. He walked over to her and took a glance at the laptop she was recording the data on. Her normally chaotically cheerful demeanor that could put a greased pig in the barn was gone, replaced with one pricklier than a briar patch. Her face snapped towards him, and she tilted her head. He scratched the back of his head. As much as he could tell when something was wrong with someone, he couldn't for the life of him find out what. "Everything all right?" "Fine," she muttered and turned towards the laptop again. "Just fine. Do you want to head back to the workshop?" he offered, glancing towards Nejire flying through the rafters of the gym. "I can handle things here if you want." Mei squinted at him. It wasn't quite a glare, but it was flirting with the idea of it. She glanced towards Nejire and gave a small pout before she looked towards the laptop again. "No, I'm fine." "You sure?" "Yes." All right then." He scratched the back of his head. He had a feeling in his stomach that Mei's bad mood was somehow his fault. Did he mess up? Was he spending too much time trying to make a plastic out of boogers? Maybe he could cheer Mei up. What did Mei like? She liked bits and bobs and making babies. Say Mei. Power Loader Sensei wanted me to head to the parts store this weekend and pick stuff up for the lab. That manic glee he was so used to dealing with appeared in Mei's eyes as she looked up at him. He was left with a choice, either deal with a mistake he didn't know anything about, or fix the unknown mistake with a new mistake that he understood. Best to go for the one that he could actually start to fix. "Wanna tag along? What's our budget?" "Should I take that as a yes?" "Yes." Mei bounced over to him, a wide smile spreading over her face while her entire body vibrated. "Ooh, where are we going? I should check their catalog. Are we just getting parts? Can we get some new tools?" Mostly just parts, but if you can think of some tools the workshop needs I can double-check with Sensei. Why did it feel like he had just let a pig into the feed? The expected budget might as well have just doubled. Hey. Nejire sounded off and floated down between them. The tie of her uniform had vanished along with her vest, and the top 2 buttons of her white shirt were undone, showing a bit of skin. She took a step that turned into a float and stood between them. "What's going on? Are you guys doing something?" Izuku would have to be blinder than a fat cat on a hot day to not see how Mei's mood instantly shifted back to moderately prickly, but she was still bouncing in place. Nejire saw this and started to bounce right alongside Mei. She was so adorable and cute, and pretty, and appealing and amazing. Both of them were. "Oh, nothing worth nothing, just talking to Mei about going shopping for parts this Saturday." Izuku smiled. "Our sensei wants us to get stuff for the workshop." That sounds like fun. There must be a whole lot of neat stuff there. And hanging out with you is probably a blast." Nejire jumped into the air again and did a flip with her quirk. She zoomed right in front of him, getting right into his face. "Hey, I know. We should hang out Sunday. What'd be fun with you?" We should go to the boardwalk. There's lots to do there and there's a great place to eat." Izuku felt his brain freeze. Nejire Hado, the girl he had a crush on for over a year, was effectively asking him out. Was this a date? What would he wear? Was this a date? What was he supposed to do? Was this a date? He should say yes, right? Was this a date? Mei pulled his mind out of the fog by grabbing his hand and tugging on it. I want to eat after we shop too. Mei shouted, her face redder than a baby's bottom. What? What? Well, this wasn't how he saw today going at all. Alright, sure. I guess I have a full weekend then. Sure do. Nejire chirped and floated down to stand next to Mei, a proud, triumphant smile on Nejire's face. Hey, give me your number. He was in a jam stickier than honey in the summer heat. And just as sweet too. Izuku scratched the back of his head and watched the city folk mill about while he waited for Mei to emerge from her apartment. He'd been to this place before, stayed there his first year even, but the place was a bit too tight for a person like him. Honestly, he was half surprised that Mei wasn't living in whatever space she could find in the middle of a scrapyard. That wasn't to say that Mei was a rat or anything, just more that she seemed most at home whenever there was tinkering to be done. How on earth did I go from nowhere to here in a day? He muttered and closed his eyes. Sure, he'd been invited places before from his classmates, karaoke that one time, a few dozen or so places for chow, but to have a weekend so booked he could start a library was completely new to him. Were they dates? Sure, he had invited Mei to go on the supply run to cheer her up, but the idea of grabbing some grub after they were done was all on her, and it was brought about by Nejire wanting to hang out Sunday. He'd ask his folks for advice, but his ma would probably call him a playboy and give him a bunch of advice that wouldn't apply to either Mei or Nejire, and his da would just tell ma. And the internet was no more helpful than telling him to make sure he showered and wore nice clothes. Which he reckoned just meant clean. Honestly, he was more lost than a headless chicken in the rain when it came to crushes and the like. Sure, he had a crush on Nejire, one that kept on even after a year. She was just so bubbly and cute, but he had never had someone crush on him. And if Mei really did have a crush on him, then he didn't know what to do about it. Would Nejire know? Askinned, his crush what to do if someone had a crush on him would just make him a bigger but then a donkey that got into the grain silo. And what of Nejire? Did she have a crush on him too? They were hanging out tomorrow, but was it something more? Or was he fooling himself? Was it even a crush if she was just responding to his crush? Maybe I should get Sensei a ticket to a tractor show or something. He leaned back against the wall and debated on going to go find Mei or texting her to find out what's what. Or the word moonshine drowned in his mouth as he saw Mei step up towards him. Now, while he was very much aware that Mei was a woman, hell, he had even assumed that he was more aware of her gender than she was, and thought that she was cute with some curves, he had underestimated what a bit of effort on her part would do to her. In that she had gone from the natural girl he got along with like they were two peas in a pod to what looked like a clown in some heels. A moist smear of lipstick covered part of her lips, her left eye was shut tight, and there was enough blush on her cheeks that she looked like a tomato. Her every step looked like she was about to faceplant, and from the scuff marks on her sundress, she probably already had. Mei, he rushed over to her and caught her. What on earth got into your head? Is it that bad? She asked weakly. Totally. Both he and Mei jumped a foot when they saw Nejire standing right beside them. It was his first time seeing Nejire in casual clothes, her long blue hair pulled up into a ponytail that bounced with every slight movement. The light blue shirt she had on was baggy on the top, but cut off just short of her stomach, showing off a bit of her waist, and her black plants looked loose and breathable. It looked like the kind of thing a dancer would wear during practice. Or maybe at the gym. Nejire? Izuku shouted and looked at Mei. What are you doing here? I live here. She pointed towards one of the apartments on the top floor, a convenience store bag dangling in her hand. I saw you waiting, so I decided to wait too because I wanted to see how cute Mei would look. Mei let out a groan that was nearly identical to the one she gave whenever she was being forced to do something she didn't want, like safety protocols. What happened to your eye? Don't know. He had never heard Mei sound so defeated. Makeup? Well that's no good, especially if you don't wash it out. It can do damage. And that's your quirk, right? Nejire grabbed onto Mei's other arm and looked down at her heels. You're crushing your feet too. Did I do anything right? Your dress is cute. It shows off your bub good. Nejire smiled and then looked up to Izuku. Hey, you're big and strong and stuff. Carry Mei, there's no way she can handle stairs in those things. Sure. He jumped and held out his arm towards Mei. Is it alright if I carry you? She turned her head away, but nodded. Yeah. Izuku followed Nejire all the way to her apartment on the 3rd floor and helped her in. You can see the inside of my apartment some other time. Nejire placed a finger to his hihi and stuck her tongue out. Mostly because you're huge and I need space to help Mei, and it's a mess, and I'm not ready for you to know what color underwear I wear. He opened his mouth but no noise came out. Not ready? What? And the shopping thingy is going to have to wait for tomorrow. Should I just wait out here? He asked, gesturing towards the slightly narrow hallway. Nejire tapped her chin and looked back towards Mei. I don't think so. It'd be a bummer knowing that you're out there being bored and stuff. I know. Go find something fun for us to do after I fix Mei up. Oh, and dinner. I just got done with my Zumba class, so I'm super hungry. The door was shut, and Izuku was left with many questions, such as, what on earth was a Zumba? XXXX, why are you helping me? Because you need it? Mei gave a frustrated grunt at that very hero-like response that came from Nejire. She should have known better. Most of the heroes she met would do the same, other than their sensei, though they seemed to enjoy suffering just a bit. She felt Nejire dab her face with some kind of a moist cloth, carefully removing the layer of makeup she had put on. I mean, aren't we rivals? Mei asked. That's what the internet said at least. I like Izuku, and so do you. So why help me? Because I think you're cute? Nejire's voice was so chipper Mei couldn't help but believe her. And besides, how do you know I like Izuku? Mei kept her eyes shut while Nejire continued to dab and slowly remove the mountain of irritants that she had placed on in an attempt to stuck Izuku. She had bought a bunch of makeup a while ago to impress Izuku, but had never figured out how to wear it. She spent all last night using the internet to figure it out. She bit the inside of her lip, unwilling to taste lipstick more than she had to. How could you not? Well, for starters, I barely know him. Nejire hummed softly, her soft touch slowly removing the damage that Mei had done to herself. Don't get me wrong, he is cute, tall, handsome, and checks all of my boxes, so I am interested in him. That's why I wanted to hang out with him. Oh. Mei felt a pit in her stomach grow. She wanted to run. She wanted to bury herself in her room and pretend like she hadn't messed today up. She wanted to have fun with Izuku, she wanted to buy parts, tools, and things with him. And eat food with him. Crushes SEK? Yeah, kinda, but hey, why do you like Izuku? I don't know. Why don't you try? Mei let out a sigh and winced as she felt Nejire pull something out of her eye. Probably one of the fake eyelashes she had given up on after they broke. He understands me. I feel like I can talk to him forever. And I really like working with him. I feel things when he smiles at me. What do you feel? A large, damp towel pressed against her lips, silencing her for a few moments while Nejire continued to remove the makeup. Happy. Mei shrugged. Warm. Is weird, but I like it. Well, it sounds like you really care for Izuku. Nejire continued to remove the makeup. Wanna know something? What? I have a crush on you? Huh? Mei's eyes shot open and she saw Nejire's face was far closer to her than she realized. Her heart was racing, and she scrambled back, her head bouncing against Nejire's bed. What? Is that? What? Oh, was that too much? Nejire placed a finger on the edge of her smile, but remained where she was. Sorry, I probably should have kept that to myself, huh? But, Izuku. Oh, I like him too. That's allowed. There are no rules for liking people, Mei, Nejire explained softly. But what? Why what? Crush. What? You're cute when you're embarrassed? Nejire's smile turned into a predatory one that made Mei feel completely and utterly overwhelmed. But I have a crush on you because I do. You're like a female version of Izuku, and I think grease monkeys are hot. Aside from being cute and having really nice bub, I guess it's just that you're neat and I want to know a lot about you. Despite herself, Mei looked down at her. This was the second time Nejire had mentioned her melons. Were they that nice? But were girls? So. Nejire did a strange motion, tucking a bit of hair behind her ear, and somehow Mei felt her toes tingle. There's nothing wrong with that. But, honestly, the fact that there were two genders and that it meant something was still something that Mei was still struggling with, and her only real coping mechanism had been to use male and female mechanical components to justify the idea. But 2 female components didn't work. But nothing. Nejire crawled towards her, her shirt dipping low enough to show the sports bra she was wearing while her wide hips swayed like a tiger ready to pounce. Instead of fangs and claws, Nejire pounded with the soft touch of the damp rag she had been using. "You want to know what would happen if you got a crush on me too?" She was afraid to ask, but terrified not to know. "What? We can share Izuku?" Nejire sounded so happy. "I mean, think about it. We both get a super hot boyfriend that can bench a tractor with a smooth country boy accent, and we both get a super cool and appealing girlfriend. It'd be great. Is that allowed? There's no rule against it." Somehow, that pit in her stomach had vanished, replaced by the near-constant beating heart in her feet. "I got most of it off, but the rest is going to need to be washed off. Do you want to go to the bathhouse?" Nejire's smile widened. "We can talk more about sharing Izuku and each other. I think I need time to process." Nejire's phone vibrated on the table. Izuku found a place to eat and offered to take us both to a movie theater. "Ooh, he said to tell you that there's a giant robot movie playing." "So where's the bathhouse?" Mei asked. Thinking time was over. Nejire's face twisted into one of equal parts confusion and disgust. "We're neighbors, how do you not know where the bathhouse is?" "I mostly just shower." "Oh, okay then. You're going to love it. It's pretty nice. We can even compare bub." "Why?" "Because it's CC and fun." There was something downright divine about a girl fresh out of the bath. Nejire was Nejire, as always, which meant she was hotter than a $2 pistol and bubblier than any pop this side of Tokyo. Gone was the fitness look she had on earlier in the day that gave him a look at her tummy, and in its stead was something that Izuku could only describe as nice. The plain light blue shirt she had on was modest except when it wasn't, and the skirt she had on seemed intent on swaying with her every single movement. Her long blue hair that twirled behind her was still held tight by a scrunchie that deserved several medals for its efforts. Then there were those pretty blues of hers that could make even the prettiest day green with envy. They seemed supercharged, lively, and Izuku found himself strong-pressed to look away from her. Or at least, he would have been had it not been for the sight of Mei. A freshly scrubbed Mei in plain clothes was downright radiant. Her hair had gone from looking like insulation foam to cotton candy, and the rest of her was just as sweet. The black trousers she had on appeared to be hanging onto her hips as though their life depended on it, with only a tied belt to provide any assistance. Much like Nejire, her shirt was ordinary, and much like Nejire's, it was deceitful in its plainness. The light blue fabric made Mei's golden eyes and pink hair pop, while the dark blue gear on her city was distorted by her lovely lady lumps. But there was something ever so slightly off about the way Mei was being Mei. She seemed more muted than normal just in the way she carried herself. It was like that brief moment of satisfaction she got after making a new gizmo but extended beyond its usual duration of time between projects, which for Mei could be as few as 2 seconds in the negative. It wasn't a bad look for her, just different. How in tarnation did he end up with 2 crushes? He could barely even handle the one. Now that he was hanging out with that crush, he developed a crush on the girl he'd been hanging out with. What in the Sam Hickory F was he supposed to do about all this then? "Howdy." Izuku nodded to the 2 girls as they met up near one of the best local places to eat, some barbecue shop that was just the right mix of cheap, easy, and good. Besides, who didn't like barbecue? "Howdy." Nejire jumped the last few steps towards him, likely using her quirk to float to extend her airtime. She had a great big smile on her face that Izuku couldn't help but match. "Thanks for waiting." "Oh, it weren't nothin'," Izuku hummed and glanced towards Mei. "Did something happen?" "Well, besides the whole makeup thing. We talked. And we went to the bath. It was a lot of fun." "How was the bath fun?" "Well, if it was with a girl he reckoned it might be a bit of fun. She'll be fine though, I think she's still processing a lot of stuff though." And Mei stopped and looked up at Izuku, then looked at Nejire, then looked up at Izuku. "I have a crush on you. Nejire also wants to date you, and she also wants to date me, and we bathed together and there was so much melons, and I think I want to date Nejire too, but she said that she has a plan that involves all of us dating each other, and I think that's a great idea." Nejire slammed her forehead. Izuku felt a headache brewing that would likely last a lifetime and a half with how things were going today. He stared at Mei, who was looking up at him like a lost puppy with a great big smile on her face, then towards Nejire, who looked at Mei with a mixture of disbelief and something that bordered on hysterical. Cooler heads prevailed. "Mei, there's a proper way to handle things," Nejire said in a soft voice and placed a hand on Mei's shoulder. "What's wrong with telling the truth?" Mei asked. "I legit can't even argue that." "Alright." Izuku held up both of his hands, one for each of the petite women that took up more space in his head than a pair of tractors. "I'm going to need y'all to run that by me nice and slow, like, because my country boy brain ain't too sure what's what." Mei opened her mouth, but Nejire covered it with her hand. "Sure, but let's sit down to eat first, alright?" Nejire glanced up towards the building. "I think this place has private booths." XXXX, a sizzling grill separated him from the two girls that were spouting nonsense just a few minutes ago. He could barely understand one crush. And he was confident he could figure out what to do with a girlfriend if he got one: treat them real nice, tell them they're pretty, and just be himself around them while they did their day by day. He was sure there was a whole maze of other stuff, but he'd figure that out bit by bit. But now all that was having a neat little wrench thrown into it, as both girls he fancied wanted to do something that was downright unorthodox. Not that there was anything wrong with not being normal. He was pretty sure he'd been unorthodox since the day he showed up to you. "It alright?" Izuku stared at the sizzling meat he'd been cultivating for the past 5 minutes. He poked it softly with the chopstick and then flipped it to the side, sending a fresh spurt of succulent meaty juices up into the air. "Run that by me again." Nejire wiped a bit of drool from her mouth and smiled sweetly at him. "Sorry, I was distracted by how CC you are when you're cooking." Mei grunted in response. "Now look, flattery works on me, but I'm trying to figure out what the hell you two are talking about." Izuku directed a chopstick towards Mei. "As far as I'm aware, just yesterday she was glaring at you like a cat that was 15 minutes early to dinner." Nejire giggled. "And you, now I'm pretty darn sure my crush on you was a one-sided affair, and now out of nowhere you like me back. And then both of yous are talking about all of us dating all of us." Izuku sighed and started to doll out the meat, making sure to deliver the best to both Mei's and Nejire's plates. "And this is probably the fact that I'm a country boy, but I feel like I'm missing several steps. That's Mei's fault." Nejire pointed a chopstick towards Mei. "She jumped the gun with the confession." Mei shrugged. "I thought being honest was important." "It is," Nejire sighed, "but we could have done this smoother." "Alright, y'all can save the bickering for later." Izuku shoved a piece of meat into his mouth and savored its juicy flavors for a moment before he pointed his chopstick back at Nejire. "So, please, explain why you want this, because I'm at a loss." Mei nodded in agreement. Nejire whined and sunk deeper into her seat. "Well, it's going to sound pretty shallow from me." She poked at her own dinner before placing the chopsticks down. "But there's a lot of reasons, I think. Actually, this might sound super bad, but basically, I'm physically attracted to both of you. Izuku, you're like really tall and really buff, and that just does things for me. Mei has really nice boobies and she's super cute, and I want to do things to her. So it's purely physical?" "Nope," Nejire hummed. "Mei's also really interesting and I like to hear her talk about stuff I don't understand, and you're also the same way, Izuku?" Nejire sat up in her seat and started to bounce slightly. "You're both so passionate about what you do, it's amazing. It's really attractive and I love hearing you two talk. And you're both amazing at it too. Like I can ask you both so many questions and get so many awesome answers about amazing things." Nejire had her elbows tucked into her sides while she waved her hands about in a way that was just far too cute, even for her. "And you're both nice and stuff. Like, I want to get to know you both romantically." Well, that had his heart doing all kinds of wonderful things. "Okay." Nejire looked between both of them, then locked eyes with Izuku. "Does that work? Does stuff include what happened in the bath? And more? What happened in the bath?" Izuku asked. "You can find out when you join us." Izuku was pretty sure he heard the couple in the next booth cough. Mei blinked and then nodded. "That sounds like fun. Also," Nejire bounced in her seat again, holding a single finger up like she was giving a lesson. "Think about it. If you agree you get to have 2 super hot and CC girlfriends, that's a better deal than a lot of guys get. And I get to have a giant country hunk and a CC greasy monkey. Mei gets to have you and me, and I think she needs us. Izuku swallowed another bite of meat and closed his eyes. I understand what you're saying, but, just, Izuku scratched the back of his neck. I mean, I don't want no broken feelings or nothing, but I also figured my first romance would be a bit more normal, You should have thought about that before getting a crush on me and seducing Mei. Nejire snapped her fingers. But it's not like this is set in stone or anything. I have no idea what we're doing either, so we can change things to make it work, and if we don't like it, we can end it. But I have a feeling it's going to be great. Well, I mean, you're both prettier than a June bug sipping cola. Why did they both squirm at that? So I'd be out of my mind to say no to both of you. He took in a long, steady breath and leveled a look at them both. Just so long as this is something you both want. Mei shuddered. And Nejire nodded. If you keep looking at me like that, hell yes? How on earth was he going to keep up with 2 girls at once? And what in the name of all that was good and swell in the world was he going to tell his mother?